It's time to look in the mirror, America. Do you like what you see?
I keep referring to Obama as the magic Negro.
Do you like what you see now?
Well, suck on this.
It's just a mirror, America.
Shared sacrifice by everybody.
What could it do to you except reflect your image?
I did nothing wrong at the Minneapolis airport.
The Majority Report.
Far more credible to me than PBS and Frontline.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Tuesday, June 19th, 2018. My name is Sam Seder. This is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, poet, author, Eliza Griswold, on her new book, Amity and Prosperity, One Family and the Fracturing of America. Also on the program today, Trump and Republicans continue to attempt to justify fascism. They see it as a possible election winner. Meanwhile, in Kansas, Chris Kobach's voter suppression law struck down and Kobach sent back to law school. Meanwhile, Trump introduces a Trump University-style health plan, which will also have the added benefit of undermining real health insurance. Finally, we are safe from the real aliens. Trump intros. Space Force.
It's important for military.
Meanwhile, the White House continues its trade war with China as the Senate stymies his ZTE giveaway. John Kelly reportedly no longer cares about Trump being impeached.
Yeah, whatever, dude.
And happy Juneteenth.
What's that?
Thanks, Obama.
Thanks a lot, Obama. Oh, yeah, Slavery Day. Whatever.
Lastly, the jack-booted boot of government prevails. Plastic fat is no longer legal to be put in your food. You've lost the freedom to eat plastic fat, ladies and gentlemen. I'm sorry. All that and more on today's program. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to stumble through the intro. I just got a little bit agitated. I generally don't do this. I mean, because I have a finely honed plan to open the show, and from moment to moment, each moment of the show is been meticulously planned, hours, sometimes days, sometimes weeks in advance. However, in rare moments, I get distracted, and this is one of them. So, okay. I was on Twitter this morning, and I used to go on Dylan Radigan's program all the time and one of the regular guests I was on with, I would say regularly for at least about a year, was Tim Carney, who is a writer for the Washington Examiner, and Tim is a libertarian. But yet, we became friends, and we would occasionally go out and have a beer and continue to argue, like we were on the program.
Free exchange of ideas.
And so today, Tim tweeted out, forcibly separating children from their parents for lengthy, indefinite periods is bad. A legal system that encourages illegal immigrants to drag their children through dangerous networks of human smuggling is also bad. our editorial, and then it goes to an editorial on the Washington Examiner. Now, I would agree, forcibly separating children from their parents for lengthy, indefinite periods is bad. That part, he had me. A legal system that encourages illegal immigrants to drag their children through dangerous networks of human smuggling is also bad, is, first off, a lie. It is not a legal system, at least in this country, that encourages, and they're not illegal immigrants, incidentally, if they're coming for asylum, that encourages human beings from leaving their home because they don't want their kids to be killed by gang members. They don't want their husbands to be beating them to death or beating their children. And so they try and come to the United States seeking political asylum. And if you're talking about our legal system, which encourages people to come and seek asylum, is bad, then we should not have signed on to that 1951 treaties convention on asylum seekers. Article 31 of the 1951 convention relating to the status of refugee provides as follows. If you're really concerned about the rule of law, the contracting state shall not impose penalties on the account of their illegal entry or presence. Now, every reported piece, and unless for some reason people at the Examiner know something different, they have shut down the bridge that allows people to go and officially present themselves to our Border Patrol. And you have people who are crossing the river and then looking for Border Patrol agents to say, I'm seeking asylum. The contracting state shall not impose penalties on account of their illegal entry or presence on refugees who, coming directly from a territory where their life or freedom was threatened, in the sense of Article 1, enter or are present in their territory without authorization, provided they present themselves without delay to the authorities and show good cause for their illegal entry or presence. So they have every right under the 1951 Convention to the Status of Refugees to go and present themselves. So the idea as written in this op-ed, compassion and the rule of law at the border. Like, we could have compassion, but the rule of law is so important here. Current federal law leaves the nation choosing between two bad options and inevitably finding the other side's stance repugnant. That is not true. That is not true. Current federal law does not handcuff these people because just a paragraph later, three paragraphs later, this is not a good way to treat people when it can be avoided. Okay, the implication, it can't be avoided. Previous administrations did avoid it, but only by shrugging at immigration enforcement and granting extra leeway to illegal immigrant families with children. Now, these are not illegal immigrants. They are asylum seekers until they've been deemed not to be eligible for asylum. This gentler treatment of families reflects either a good and charitable disposition and a desire to keep children and parents together, or a cynical laxity in the administration's constitutional duty to uphold the law. Probably both. There is no law. There was no breach of law to allow asylum seekers to go through the process and therefore not deem these asylum seekers to be criminals and therefore not make it necessary to separate the children from the parents. There is no law. That is a lie. Now, fortunately, for the people at the Examiner, there is no law about lying in op-eds. But just like this op-ed says, maybe it's a cynical laxity in the administration's constitutional duty. Or maybe it just reflects a good and charitable disposition and is not a breach of the rule of law. Just like that op-ed deems to sort of look into the mentality of every past administration, which has not locked up asylum seekers. I took the liberty of trying to determine why one might write an editorial like that. And so I suggested that not only is forcibly, well, let me see what I hear. Not only is forcibly separating children from their parents bad, and not only is a legal system that encourages illegal immigrants to drag their children through dangerous networks of human smuggling also bad, although, again, I think that's disingenuous and a complete misunderstanding of why people come here. I mean, I'm going to drag my kid through a network, a dangerous network of human smuggling, because why? Because I want to live in relative poverty in a hostile country for just no reason? For no reason. I woke up this morning, I was like, God, I'm living in a non-hostile country. I haven't jeopardized my child's life recently. What can I do today? So I wrote, lack of moral clarity in order to maintain political access is also bad. So yes, I imparted some motive to why someone would write something so disingenuous. And that motive, the only thing I come up with is like, we need to maintain our position as being we need to maintain an audience. Because if we come out and say this is horrific, we're not like Laura Bush, who doesn't care if she has no audience. We're not like a retiring senator who only has to respond to big business, who doesn't really care in this. Our audience is actually the knuckle-dragging morons that 57% of whom support this policy in the Republican Party. I imagine it's even going up. I mean, they think in the White House this is going to help them politically. It very well may. They certainly know who their voters are. Pretending that this policy move is anything but sadistic bad too. Now, maybe they're not pretending. Maybe they genuinely believe that the Trump administration is so married to the notion of the rule of law. They have so much respect for the rule of law that they couldn't possibly do anything else. In which case, the fact that I not impart total fucking ignorance to these people is my bad. But I assume since they had the ability to function a computer, that they are aware that saying that the Trump administration is doing something because they're so bound to the rule of law, they couldn't possibly do anything else, is a joke. And then I added, ignoring the fact that the party in power has for a decade stood in the way of any sort of compromise, also bad. Because if you genuinely think we are bound by law to do nothing but separate these kids, then you also have to look back at the Republican Party and say, this is why we're still bound by this law. Because there's been plenty of times, and I haven't agreed with what the Democrats have offered. I don't think we should have a permanent underclass of guest workers. But there's been plenty of opportunity to resolve any of these issues multiple times, including one that was offered by Republicans and even George Bush. But the same people that this op-ed panders to stood in its way. And so Tim was upset with my tweet and added assigning bad motives to an old friend via quote tweet is also bad. And to be fair to Tim, I did not think that he wrote this. It is an unsigned piece. I didn't realize he wrote the op-eds. Because it never occurred to me that Tim, who I know is a good dad, could ever write something like this. It's absurd. It's absurd. It's an absurd piece. So, sorry, not sorry.
Wow. You went to the classic sorry, not sorry.
I couldn't come up with anything else
the
to
moral
cap that.
indignation, the policy sweep, the historical rudeness. A segment so good that even I can't give you snark about it. And you ended with a sorry, not sorry.
Sorry, not
Hell
sorry.
yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
I got to take a break.
Do.
We're going to take a break. When we come back, Eliza Griswold on one family story of dealing with fracking in Pennsylvania. We'll be right back.
Forgive the kids, for they don't know how to live. Run the alleys casually. They could take or leave you, so they took you and they left you. How could they be casually
We are back. Sam Seder on the Majority Report on the phone. It is a pleasure to welcome to the program poet and journalist, author of the 10th Parallel, but also most recently, Amity and Prosperity, One Family in the Fracturing of America. Eliza Griswold, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me, Sam.
So let's, I think people are familiar with the process of fracking. You started to you started to report this back in 2011. It is the story of in particular one family. Tell us who the family is and how you came to follow them.
The family's name is the Haneys. They're the Haney family, and they live in the town of Amity, Pennsylvania, and they come from another nearby town called Prosperity. So the title of the book is actually these two towns, Their family has been from this area of southwestern Pennsylvania for more than a century. And I came to meet them because the first and only time, really, early on, that the mom in the family, Stacey Haney, who's a single mom and a nurse, spoke out publicly. She spoke about what was happening to her family in a little community meeting at the Morgantown, West Virginia airport in March of 2011. And at that point, she was very nervous to address the crowd. She was nervous because the gas company was supplying her family water at the time, and she was afraid that if she spoke out about the problems that she had faced from the company, that they would take her water away. So she stood up and she said, listen, I'm from this area. I am a nurse. I've had my family tested, and we have benzene and toluene in our bodies. And my 14-year-old has been diagnosed with arsenic poisoning. And we found out that there's a massive industrial waste pond just about a quarter mile from our house up a hill, and that's about all we know. It was the beginning for her of putting together a much larger mystery of what had happened to her family as a result of industrial exposure.
And I'm just curious, how did you come to? I mean, had you read about that? Were you looking for a story? Were you passing through the airport? How did you come to find her?
I don't regularly pass through the Morgantown, West Virginia airport. So what had taken me there, curiously, was a trip to Nigeria. I had recently been in Nigeria when a bridge collapsed, and I was riding as I had to get to this little town, and there was no way to the town without the bridge. So I was riding, as you do, on an empty oil barrel across this river. And it was a couple of weeks after the bridge in Minneapolis, I-35W, had collapsed and killed 13 people. And there was something about that experience of riding on that river in Nigeria, thinking about Minneapolis, that really galvanized what I had been thinking for a long time as a writer and as a reporter, that I needed to return to America and look at the problems that were facing our country and not just the global South.
Interesting. And so, okay. So Stacey Haney, she has a couple of kids. She had leased her mineral rights to Range Resources in 2008. Like when she started to put after that first time where she said it publicly, what was she expecting would happen when she announced it, I guess, to the town? I mean, had she talked to Range Resources at that time? What were
she
her?
Had.
Go ahead.
Yeah. She, Stacey is not in any way politically active. She, like many people who live in her town, really doesn't agitate on behalf of causes. This is a community that really does not like the word environmentalist for the most part. That word is associated with liberal politics, and the much older tradition and the much more supported tradition is one of conservation, which really dates back to Teddy Roosevelt. So when she realized that when test results came back, it indicating that in her read of them, her children had been impacted by the oil and gas site nearby, she approached the company and awaited for their response. And she really didn't, as I had said, she really didn't want to make waves because she was afraid that making waves, when she feared that something had gone wrong, she called the company and said, I think something's wrong with my water. And they do what they did at the time, which is immediately supply drinking water while they investigated what had gone wrong. In the course of that investigation, as she became more and more certain of what had happened, which the company disputed, she became afraid of speaking out against the company, as I said, because she was afraid they'd take her water away. And she thought even then that the smarter thing to do would be to reason with the company privately. And that's what she tried to do for a really long time.
And she initially sold those mineral rights. Like what was involved in selling those mineral rights? Was it was it just simply under her property? Was it around her property?
Yeah, so one of the things that I came to understand while reporting this book over 7 years is that, the idea of selling mineral rights in Appalachia is centuries old.
Right.
You know, people have been selling mineral rights since really just before and after the Civil War, when coal companies started coming in, and many farms sold off the rights to the coal beneath their land. So this is an old idea, and it's something that people are really have sophisticated understandings of. Like, okay, you go that deep down, and this layer of shale I can sell. They're smart, and they're informed about what's beneath them. So when fracking came to town, where it really promised to be different than previous cycles of, harvesting carbon from beneath this land, is that the oil and gas companies were going to compensate people much more for their land. So when Stacy got wind of these new oil and gas leases, and she learned that in her area she could be paid $1,000 an acre to sign one of these leases. She had 8 acres. At the time, she was hoping to build this dream barn that was going to cost about $9,000. So she signed on one level because she wanted to build this barn, and on another level because she was told that signing this lease was her patriotic duty, because it would help in several key ways. It would help make America energy independent. It would return the oil and gas industry to the Rust Belt. Her father is an out-of-work steel worker, and the idea that there might be a new industrial boom was very appealing to her. On top of that, it would help keep American soldiers out of harm's way, because they wouldn't have to engage in foreign entanglements if America didn't need foreign oil. So for all of those reasons, she felt very good about signing a lease, that it wasn't just private gain, but that it was for the greater good is why she did it.
All right, I want to put a pin in that for a second, but also just add that the other major difference, aside from the amount of money that they're paying in terms of this extraction, is that unlike other extractive processes, this one adds something to the ground. I mean, beyond like substructures and whatnot, right? I mean, when you extract coal, you're depending on how you do it, you're pulling stuff out of the ground, but you're not leaving a lot behind. In fracking, that's where the benzene, I guess, and the other somewhat mystery chemicals come in. Will you just explain that part of the process, and how much awareness did she have about that part of it?
Sure. So I'm going to start with coal for a minute because it's fascinating. The town of Prosperity, which is about 10 miles from Amity where they live, Prosperity, people still live there, but parts of it are a ghost town because industrial coal mining has come through, and the burb it's being undermined. And when the coal mine comes through, farms often lose their water because you remove the coal seam and you affect the aquifer. And so when farms lose their water, people leave, right? And the coal company buys the farm, and they do so at market price or better. So a lot of people are happy to be out of Appalachia. They've been waiting for this chance, and sometimes they call that the long wall lottery. So there are divided opinions on every aspect of what I call the harvest of carbon, of industrial development of this area. Some people love it, some people hate it, and some people fear it. And for exactly the reason that you're talking about, that what's injected into the earth, there are problems with what's injected into the earth, and there's problems with what comes back out of the earth after a frack. What's injected into the earth, if an oil and gas company were on the phone with you right now, they would make perfectly clear that the vast majority of those chemicals are things available to people beneath their kitchen sinks. And while there's certainly an aspect of truth to that, some of these components are proprietary. We don't know what is in them. They are certainly carcinogens among them. And that is, you're talking about the benzene and the toluene, and those are gas-related products that are carcinogenic, along with what ethylene glycol, antifreeze. One of the things from the beginning that these families feared was in their water, because it was coming back on water tests that they received, they saw it, was the presence of antifreeze. And for a long period of time, to me, while I was reporting for the New York Times for this book, the company denied the use of ethylene glycol. These and other components are injected into the earth under great pressure, approaching that of a shotgun blast. And that's what drives the fluid into the earth up, as much as 2 miles, and then out along a horizontal fracture for another couple of miles. What returns after the frack is also a matter of concern, possibly more so, because what's coming back to the surface, and not all the waste returns, but that which does return is laden with radioactive material that's been in the ground for millennia. And certainly, and this is where we get into, again, an oil and gas company will tell you, well, these are naturally occurring elements, and that is certainly true. Radioactive material, however, even in small amounts, can be detrimental to health. So lots of what people want a definitive answer. Is fracking safe? Can we do it? Can we not? Can we do it safely? And, my response to that, having reported carefully over a matter of years, is really, I can point out to you, can I give a blanket statement like that? No, that's not the nature of careful reporting. Can I point out to you vulnerabilities at each stage of this process? I absolutely can. And with the unknowns, we have the precautionary principle, first do no harm. And I would stand by that. That's largely what Europe does. Not going to put in a way of extracting carbon from the earth unless we're sure that it's not going to be harmful to human health. And then that we just can't be sure of.
And do we have and because these the elements that are injected into the ground are proprietary, do we have a way of knowing if we even, because when we test water, I mean, you know this, but I don't know if everyone knows, is when you test water, you have to test for certain things. You can't just simply say, like, what's in the water, and you get a list of all these things. You need to put in elements into the water which show the existence of other elements. If we don't know all that's in these fracking fluids, we can't really know if we can judge whether this stuff is in the water that may be contaminated, correct?
That's exactly right. That's exactly right, Sam, and such a good point. On top of that, sometimes these companies use tracers in a frack so that they know where the water went. If those tracers are proprietary and we can't get a hold of what they are, there's no way to check whether that water contamination has happened or not, because you don't know what the tracer is. And the company can hold that as proprietary, which is one of the aspects that happened in this case. Furthermore, it's not an accident. In a proposed oil and gas law in Pennsylvania, there was a clause put in which critics called the physician gag rule. The state was actually bidding to put this law into effect, where a physician would be able to find out if he thought or she thought the patient was affected by chemicals related to oil and gas. The physician could find out what was used to an extent, but would never be able to tell either the patient or any other doctor because those elements are proprietary. So we really look into what sounds here. Many companies say, well, we fully disclose what we use. Once you start to dig down into that assertion, you find that it's impossible for them to disclose what they use. They don't know. Why? Because they're subcontracting the use of many of those chemicals, and the chemical manufacturers are using them as proprietary. So they're not telling the gas company. So each stage, like as I said, each stage of this, as you really begin to dig into it, that you find just very practical and rational problems that make it hard to believe some of the assertions that fracking is perfectly safe.
And we certainly could make it. We could statutorily fix this in a minute, right? I mean, the state of Pennsylvania, the federal government could say anything you inject into the ground in a fracking process must be accounted for. And is there really, and then I want to move on to sort of the story of the Haneys, because I mean, that's the heart of this. But is there really at this point, if by statute you insisted anything you put into the ground in this process has to be revealed, like we do this with food ingredients, right? I mean, it's not that this concept is out there. Is there really going to be a disadvantage to a fracking company at this point to have it public knowledge what chemicals they're putting into the ground? I mean, even if, like we say, like, okay, you don't have to put amounts, but just anything that you put in. I mean, is there really a legitimate argument that this would put a company at a material commercial disadvantage if everyone had to reveal this?
Well, you just nailed it, right? Because that's what a company would say to you. That, first of all, it's like any process of subcontracting, and that's something that I noticed here. Having reported most of my career from Iraq and Afghanistan and other war zones, especially places where subcontractors work, right? And looking at the process in a war zone or where subcontractors are less and less accountable for their actions, right? So in the process of fracking, so much of this work is subcontracted out. And among those subcontractors are the chemical manufacturers. So it's even an internal fight. We are not going to tell you, we're not going to tell the oil and gas operator, because they would hold. If one of those chemical manufacturers were on the phone with you now, who believed that their secret formula for their Coke was the nature of what made them money, they would absolutely push back against your assertion right now. It's really baffling from the outside, just from a very practical standpoint. This book is very, very practical. It's deeply reported. It's not an activist book. So I asked all these same questions that you're asking from as reasonable a vantage as I could over 7 years, over people who supported fracking and people who didn't, to try to make sense of exactly what you're asking. How can it be these very practical regulations are not in place? Who would they cost? And still, within the corporate structure, they are staunchly resistant.
Oh, well, I mean, but we know who it would cost, right? Because we know who it would cost, because it's not, it's much easier. And granted, I'm doing it from not a place of having done the reporting that you have done. And you can tell me whether or not this assessment is correct. It is much easier to make the argument at this point, particularly in the stage of fracking, that the disadvantage would not be within the commercial marketplace. Our special recipe for fracking is so sacrosanct that if we tell all the ingredients, our competitors will be able to use it and we'll lose our competitive edge. That argument seems a lot less compelling than if we don't reveal all of the potentially harmful chemicals in our secret sauce, we can never be held accountable if these chemicals show up in somebody's drinking water or body.
Absolutely. And again, where I found this most shocking was in relation to the use of tracers. Because if there are tracers in the water which can definitively assess whether or not this water, if they're tracers in the frac fluid and you're trying to assess water contamination or even just where that fluid went, how can it possibly be that a company doesn't have to reveal what that tracer is? Like, how can that possibly be if there's a question of contamination? And it boils down to a regulatory failure. And that failure on both a state and federal level, companies are not held accountable, and it's not just their corporate fault. It's the fault of our government and our government structures not to adequately regulate these guys. And that boils down to one of the larger issues in this book and kind of gets back to that parallel between Nigeria and Appalachia, which is we're looking at deep public poverty, right? We're looking at an under-resourced system, disadvantaged people who have been screwed over a century, who are poorer for what's beneath their feet. Why is it that people who live on land richest in natural resources are among the poorest on the earth? There's a word for that. It's called the resource curse. And some of those dynamics apply not just in the global south, not just in Africa and Asia, but they apply in America, and nowhere more so than in Appalachia. Right. So a lot of this book is not just about fracking. It's looking at those centuries of resource extraction and how they have disenfranchised rural Americans, and how those rural Americans are now incredibly pissed off and think that urban Americans, they're paying the energy appetites for for urban Americans, and urban Americans don't even understand what it costs when they flip on their lights. So a lot of those larger questions are really what's at the heart of the book.
Okay, and that dynamic, you do a great job of showing that dynamic, that it builds this sort of urban-rural resentment, that there has been a systemic failure of both the state EPA version, the Department of Environmental Protection in Pennsylvania, and the federal EPA, particularly when it comes to Pennsylvania. In particular, it seems like. How much of an awareness is there amongst the people there that resource curse is not actually a curse? There's nothing magical about it. It's that big money wants what's underneath their ground, and they will pay off a government to make sure that they're not prevented from doing so. I mean, that's the story,
Exactly.
right? I mean,
That's the story. There you go. That's the story.
how much are they aware of that?
They're aware of it, but it's more complex for them. And partly that has to do with that the government is deep in their pockets already on small farms. You know, it's not that they're like, why is the government failing to regulate? They never come and regulate. If I'm thinking of Ray Day, who's in the book and is extremely pro-fracking. He's made hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions, on his land, and he's very supportive of it. And part of the reason why is he would tell you that over decades, his small farm, his cattle farm, has been nearly driven out of business by overregulation. Like there's a pig farmer, Jason Clark, who keeps his pigs on Ray's farm, and every time Jason needs to give his pigs a shot, he's got to, according to regulation, have a vet come out and do it for $100. So these guys live paying this money. You know, you can't put a tractor in a stream in Pennsylvania. You've got to fence your stream so your cows can't get in it. And then one day an oil and gas company comes and takes over the side of your hillside, and they've got their bulldozer in the stream. And what's going on there? So it's that kind of hypocrisy that leads to, like, many times people will say to me, well, why don't those people, meaning rural Americans, understand they're voting against their own interests? And the truth is, because they have had a much more complex and long-standing relationship with the federal government that they don't like. And they see the federal government as more rapacious than the company.
Talk a little bit about the Whiskey Rebellion and how that sort of set a template for, I guess, for the way of these folks to view the government.
So before I started reporting this book, I really didn't understand. You know, I'm a Pennsylvania gal. I'm from the eastern part of the state, Quaker family. My family, until my grandmother died, had lived on the same land since the 1700s. And actually, George Washington had camped he'd billeted his troops there at a place called Camp Woods. And so my understanding of like Pennsylvania history was rooted in this harmonious, William Penn generated, we're all part of this peaceable kingdom. And when I started to do the research for this book, I learned a very different story. And that is really that, even before the Revolutionary War, the Pennsylvania Quaker elite were sending newly arrived Scots-Irish settlers out to the western frontier, Indian country, where they were fighting Native Americans and battling for land. They were squatters. The settlers were squatters. The land belonged to the Native Americans, and the settlers were carving their initials into tree trunks called tomahawk rights, trying to get this land. And that was setting up a pattern of where the settlers felt that the Quaker elite back in Philadelphia were hypocrites because the Quakers looked down on this rabble out west fighting this bloody rebellion on their behalf. So that history stretches before the Revolutionary War. During the Revolutionary War, many of these newly arrived settlers fought as soldiers for Washington and other commanders in the Revolutionary War. They went home afterwards. The Native Americans had taken advantage of their absence to burn down their homesteads. They were never paid. They never received their Revolutionary War, their salaries as soldiers. And they turned to the one viable crop that they really had, the one viable product, which was whiskey. And then in 1791, a little bit before, but it really came to a head then, in one of his less laudable actions, Alexander Hamilton passed the first federal excise tax in U.S. history, and he taxed whiskey. And in the western part of the state, among these settlers who were just about to have their only product, they traded whiskey among them. There was no cash. They rose up and did exactly the same things that they'd done as revolutionary soldiers and pre-revolutionary soldiers. They tarred and feathered tax collectors. They waged a full-on war against the federal government. Today, if you drive down Main Street in Washington, Pennsylvania, and you peer into the window of Mingo Creek whiskey distilleries, you'll see the portrait of Alexander Hamilton hanging upside down. He's musical or no, he's not got a lot of fans in Western Pennsylvania.
I'm not the biggest fan of Hamilton either. I haven't even seen the musical, but let's put that aside.
Really, Sam? Tell us.
Well, that's for another day. But he was a little financial for me. But yeah. But leaving that aside, so there's already this predisposition to seeing the federal government this way. In the course of the Haney's, I guess, journey through this, and just give us a sense of where Stacey Haney's family is today, and and particularly for her, did her disposition change? That was there any type of like greater awareness where it was not as the federal government is just on their side, but was she able to sort of like see like, oh, this is a corruption of what should be, or like what is her perspective on this? And what was the nature of the evolution during the time that you were with her?
Sure. So Stacey really became the most unlikely activist, and what I didn't realize I was witnessing until pretty recently, actually, was the making of a small group of citizen heroes in Trump's America. And that's really these guys. Stacey's whole family voted for Trump. She voted for Jill Stein because of her whole experience, and she saw on Jill Stein's website a slogan that said "Protect Mother Earth," and that was enough for Stacey to cast her vote for Stein. What I saw politically was the evolution of somebody who was willing to cast aside long-held beliefs in order to create a more equitable world. I mean, she told me her story not for any personal gain. She really didn't like talking about her story, to be honest. She felt a deep responsibility to share what had happened to her so it could be of service to other families facing the same thing. So, you know, I actually, to be honest, I have a chill as you asked that question, because after murky year, I mean, by that time you reach the end of this book, you know how many bras she owns, you know, their clasps are broken. You know, these people spend a lot of time in the bathroom, they're sick. So you have this incredibly intimate understanding of them, and yet their story is one of many. So Stacey's evolution was really into a pretty full-throated, not political activist, but really a human activist. She's deeply involved in what she sees as a search for justice for her and other Americans living in rural places.
And what has happened with her children?
So as the book makes clear, so her children are, they are okay. Many of the chemicals they believe they were exposed to are what's called endocrine disruptors, and they're not necessarily something they might make you ill in the very short term, but they tend to change genes. They have impacts related to reproduction. They are carcinogenic. So for all of those reasons, they live under the shadow of what's going to happen to us 10 years from now. In the course of the book, they got something called cancer insurance, which I had never heard of, to insure that if something goes down, because they live in fear of what's going to happen next, because they don't know that, in the course of the book, they have to abandon this farm that belonged to Stacy's great-grandfather for their health. They lose almost everything in this fight. They still are struggling financially. And although they go to work, they go to school, they try to stay positive, they live in this fear of what the long-term health effects are going to be of some of this exposure.
And just because I think people know that I'm sometimes heavily associated with mass tort cases, to what extent have there been any large-scale attempts to sue these companies? I mean, to do some type of mass epidemiology study and assess, if you live within X amount distance of a fracking well, you are Y% more likely to get any number of these maladies.
There are studies to that effect. Johns Hopkins did one related to asthma, and there's another related to birth defects, that just off the top of my head, those are two. Those studies are expensive, and when they come out, they're also hotly contested by the oil and gas industry. Causal links are nearly impossible. I mean, in the course of the book, these guys do take on the company. They take on both the company and the state, and that's part of why the book took 7 years, because I was following these interwoven lawsuits. And what they find, they don't even, the attorneys who come in to represent them don't even try to go to epidemiologists because the causal links are too hard to make. They go to toxicologists to begin to ask if what's in their water can be affecting these people's health. So there are many lawsuits afoot. Quite often companies use, whether it's oil or gas or another kind of company, they use the long-standing practice of non-disclosure agreements, right, which are fairly standard, to silence people who do take them on, to make sure that then, their stories don't become part of a larger narrative.
Eliza Griswold, the book is Amity and Prosperity, One Family and the Fracturing of America. Thanks so much for coming on today. Fascinating stuff.
Thanks so much for having me, Sam.
All right, folks, we're going to take a break, head into the fun half of the program, wherein we will try and have some fun, and we'll listen to some horrible people try and justify their actions.
Super fun.
Before we do, though, let me just tell you this. In addition to that there's today, right, in Union Square at 6 p.m., there are protests happening against what is going on with ICE and this detention. And also, there's been announcements of big protests happening on June 30th. And I'm trying to find, it is that same place that I had mentioned the other day. And I don't want to get the URL incorrect, but people can find it quite easily. But it's June 30th is there's going to be protests. Here it is, familiesbelongtogether.org. Familiesbelongtogether.org. You can find out where major protests to keep families together on June 30th are. And, hopefully some of this will metastasize into a broader a movement that will lead to some type of rational and just and humane policy for folks who are trying to immigrate to this country. I mean, aside from just sort of the basic humanity that is involved in this question, it is not like this is a total coincidence that these folks are within walking or busing distance of our border, and they're homes that they're living in have major social problems. In other words, if you look at the history of any of these countries in Central and in Latin America, our involvement in these countries, you can draw a direct line. Maybe not in every single case, although I would say probably an indirect line in probably the overwhelming majority. But a direct line between our involvement and what has evolved from our involvement and how people are suffering in these locations. But even if we weren't partially or mostly or totally responsible for the situations that these folks are living in, still any sense of humanity would suggest that we should let these people in who are dealing with the type of danger and threats on a daily basis that would cause them to travel through such danger and threats with their children to come to this country for an opportunity to get a sub-minimum wage job. I mean, honestly, have a little bit of humanity. If you find yourself having to argue, we're better than Nazis, then you know you have a problem. Particularly, and we'll play a clip of Jeff Sessions doing that, particularly when you're wrong.
The old John Podhoretz baseline. It's very comparing this to the Nazis.
We're not Nazis because we don't do X, and it turns out that actually we do X or something to that. You know you have a problem.
Or when it's just like, no, it's a 4x10
Here it is. Let's.
This is Todd Starnes.
Here is Todd Starnes. This is guys on Fox News, and here is his argument why President Trump is what he's doing is okay. Why? Because he's not murdering the children.
President Trump is not gassing children. President Trump is not loading up train cars with illegal alien children and sending them to the death camps. Lady Liberty is in tears because the Democrats and the mainstream media would rather side with illegal alien invaders than stand alongside their fellow Americans.
Pause it. Now, I'm sure, yes.
Not gassing children, please. Can we
thumbs
get
up,
a little intellectual honesty?
Two thumbs up for Donald Trump for not gassing children. But Lady Liberty, whoever she is, Lady Liberty, to refer to these children and these moms and these dads as invaders. If you wanted to actually lead to the rounding up and the training away and the gassing of these people, you know what you'd do? You'd call them invaders. Because what are you obligated to do when someone is, if there's a home invasion, if you're being invaded, is there any context in which you can think of where the response of the people to invaders, whether it's like, my house is being invaded by ants. What do? You kill the ants. Oh, we're being invaded by aliens. Well, come on, let's get the president. It's Independence Day. We're going to fly our jets and we're going to fire at the invaders. They're invading the beaches. Well, let's get some guns and go there and kill them. When you refer to these people as invaders, as they invade with their, blanket maybe that they're bringing from their home or their children, what is the logical response to invaders? So when this guy, Todd Starnes, says Donald Trump is not gassing them, he's not rounding them up in trains and sending them to death camps, that's a lament. That's a criticism. Why wouldn't you defend this country against invaders? I mean, this is what's going on here. And I'll tell you, I interviewed Henry Giroux yesterday. We're going to play it, I don't know, soon. But, one of the questions as he writes about fascism is like, a little bit difficult to see fascism in real time, right? Much easier to see it in retrospect. But, and we'll talk more about this as we hear, other excuses like Todd Starnes. We're not Nazis because Nazis, blah, blah, blah. But, I mean, the fact of the matter is at one point you have to say, okay, are we, one of the questions you have to ask is, are we on a road that maybe it branches off in other ways, but are we on a road towards some fascistic state? And, it would be very hard to say. It's not to say that there's no exit ramps at this point. And it's also not to assess where we are on this road. But it's really hard, I would imagine, to find anything in retrospect, anything that you would deem a fascistic state, and to look at it in retrospect and not see this chapter happening, right? Where one group of people, horrible sadistic things are being done to them. And remember, we've moved pretty quickly from illegal immigrants to immigrants, from illegal immigrants to asylum seekers to immigrants, right? To groups of people who are here perfectly legally because we've let them in because their country suffered an earthquake or this and that, and kicking them out. So that goalpost has been moved quite efficiently over the past 18 months. It's not just so-called illegal immigrants. It's people here who are here because we let them in because of natural disasters, because of civil wars, because they're seeking. We've cut down on the number of people that we legitimately let in for asylum. They're willing to trade off legal immigration slots. I mean, the goalposts have been moved. Make no mistake. So start projecting out another 18 months, another 36 months. We have a Supreme Court that says it's okay. You don't have to make a cake for gay people. I've got a story right here where some guy is in Colorado, won't rent his apartment to a Muslim. We'll see what happens when that hits the courts. And I can tell you, if one of the two liberal justices get replaced by another Neil Gorsuch, we're not that far from, if you're a Christian, you don't have to necessarily rent to a Muslim. I mean, probably better to err on the overly cautious about where we're going side than the not so cautious side. And, I don't think there's any type of magic recipe on how you fight this stuff, but I think reacting to it in some fashion is job number one. Not reacting to it, and it doesn't matter what you do, I think, as long as there's some reaction to it, is the important thing at this point. All right, we're going to take a quick break. 646-257-3920 is the number. We'll be right back.
She's
We are back. Sam Seder on the Majority Report. Just a reminder. Sorry, folks, forgot to do the plugs. Today is Tuesday. TMBS.
Bhaskar Sankara, Willie Q,
rapper. Also on Patreon, double shot of on the Antifada. Who was it? Didn't you have like a double?
Yeah, I think we're going to release it as a double episode because we have so much good stuff from this week. We talked about race and identity politics and organizing with my DSA comrade, Justin Charles.
And, of course, the literary hangover dropped, and this one's Rip Van Winkle. Yep. I remember it because of the bridge.
Yep, new Rip Van Winkle. It's also on Stitcher now.
Whoa.
Sweet.
Whoa.
You see the way Matt does that? He kind of like does his little like chair spin. It's also on Stitcher now, bitches.
Not on Sticker, it's on Stitcher. Stitcher Radio.
Stitcher Radio.
Wow.
Stitcher Radio. Get your life together.
Let's go.
He sounds like he's
calling from a
reading a Stephen
248
Covey
area
book for
code.
Audible.
Who's this? Where are you calling from? 248.
Hi, this is Tammy. I'm calling from, I'm just south of Detroit.
Hi, Tammy.
And I'm going to try to keep it together. I'm going to try to keep it together during this call. I'm sorry. But, Sam, your opening segment talking about the separation of children from their parents reminded me of your coverage the days following Hurricane Katrina. And I've never heard anyone in any media talk as passionately and as emotionally as you did at that time. And it made me cry both times. And I cannot believe what's going on in this country. I just recently retired from the post office. In my last few years there, I was a letter carrier in Southwest Detroit. And we have just an enormous, wonderful Mexican-American, South and Central American population there. And these were the kindest, cleanest people. I mean, people want to say, oh, they're dirty immigrants and all this insane stuff. I never, I'm a small white woman. I never felt anything but loved in that community. People looked out for me. I grew up around there. I grew up in Dearborn, which we have, just a wonderful, huge Muslim community. The greatest people you could ever meet. And I don't know the hatred or, the ignorance coming from other people across this country. Is it because they don't know anyone who's not white and stupid and racist like they are? I mean, I don't understand how we're here at this point. Let alone with Trump, just at this point of hating other people with such a fervor. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, I mean, I think, look, the reality is it's always been a part of America. I mean, it's not, and why that's the case, maybe is a bigger question than any type of a national identity. But the real question is, why? What are the factors that are allowing it to get such a full expression, and why are we going backwards? It feels like at this point, and I think a part of that is just sort of the cravenness of people who want political power. And they're using it. They're sort of like mainstreaming it. They're making it okay again. And it's also, I think, to a certain extent, the failure of some people to take it seriously and to recognize it and to, look, for me, the idea that Paul Ryan isn't being constantly harassed about this, because this is the guy, like those type of people who are the greatest enablers of this type of agenda. They're not the ones necessarily who are driving it, but they're the ones who are lending it some measure, some imprimatur of being okay, because they're the ones who could really, they have the levers of power. And tomorrow, there could be a law that says you can't do what's being done. Like the federal government is just not allowed in any way to charge people who come across the border for the first time to treat them as criminals in such a way that they put them through a process where they need to be separated from their children. There could be an explicit law against that, and Paul Ryan just sits back and just shakes his head and go, "This is a real shame." Blah blah blah, and to me that's the most loathsome of these people. Those are the people who are just like, those are the people who are really the most loathsome in this process, because they're the ones who are just sort of like, for expedience sake, I'm just going to allow this to happen and hope it works out fine, because they get nothing involved in it. I mean, that it's just enraging. And but listen, I appreciate the call. And
well, your show is very important and it's wonderful. It just becomes more so every day. I've got other people listening. I've listened since 2004, I believe. It's just amazing. I remember the day, though, sitting in my car in the postal truck on my lunch break, hearing you talk about Hurricane Katrina.
I remember that too.
It was just as heartbreaking as now.
Yep, really horrible.
Just horrible. I'm getting friends and other neighbors. We're going to try a little tactic that the right or the anti-abortion and women's rights groups like to do, is to go hang out at places with pictures, and we've got people working at print shops getting some posters together of children in cages, and we're going to stand out in front of Christian churches and
great.
see what kind of comments we get on Sunday. So
great.
I'll try to let you know.
All right, yes, please do. Thank you.
The most I can think of to
that's
do.
Great. I think if anybody,
can't think of anything else.
I think the bottom line is, as long as you are actually doing something, there's a net positive. I really do think that's important. Appreciate the call.
Yeah.
That's very honorable.
Let's go to calling from a 509 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, this is Neil in Topeka. I'm with 4-H.
You know, that is illegal. It is illegal to impersonate a 4-H member.
I'm calling because yesterday on your show, you listed a bunch of, I guess you think it's a big fucking joke. You listed a bunch of not serious misdemeanors. And we got a big problem over here with people pretending to be from 4-H. And I don't frankly appreciate
I'm going to need identification. I'm going to need verification that you're actually a 4-H member, because how do we know that you're not just pretending?
You go to the website. You go to the Topeka chapter of 4-H.
I'm on it right now. It's my homepage.
And
it happens to be my homepage.
I'm just saying, you act like you know a lot of stuff, and then you put your foot in your mouth by acting like it's not a big deal that people are out there pretending to be 4-H when they're not. Okay, so give a hoot and don't pollute.
That's great. You're not supposed to use that. He broke two laws that we should probably separate him from his children for. Here is, let's start with Jeff Sessions, okay? Let me just tell you how effing dumb and despicable both these human beings are. Laura Ingraham and Jeff Sessions. All right? Again, when you find yourself having to defend a policy by saying it's not as bad as the Nazis, or it's not consistent with what the Nazis did, at that point you should just stop yourself and look in the mirror and say, there's something really wrong here.
Not playing for the right team.
There's just something wrong with me as a human being. Here's Laura Ingraham and Jeff Sessions having that exact conversation, and then we'll talk about why, on top of the fact that they're despicable human beings, they're also morons.
Nazi Germany, concentration camps, human rights violations. Laura Bush has weighed in, Michelle Obama, Rosalind Carter, got all the first ladies going back to Eleanor Roosevelt. She's apparently weighed in as well. General Sessions, what's going on here?
Well, it's a real exaggeration. Of course, in Nazi Germany, they were keeping the Jews from leaving the country. But this is a serious matter. We need to think it through.
Pause it for a second. Let me tell this effing moron something, okay? The chief law enforcement officer of of the United States about the Jews not being able to leave. Many of you may be familiar with the fact that the gassing and burning and killing of 6 million Jews was the final solution of the Nazis. Let me tell you what the first solution of the Nazis was. In 1938, expulsion started just before the Wannsee Conference shifted policy to extermination. You understand? The reason why the final solution was extermination is because they couldn't expel the Jews, because in 1939, when the deportation started, first they went to Poland, but then of course they invaded Poland, and so the Jews were still there. Jews sent to Hungary were sent back, Austrian Jews, and so on. They expelled the Jews and then they were sent back, and then the Jews weren't being taken. So Jeff Sessions, aside from having to try and find a difference between his policy and the Nazis' one, couldn't come up with one. Incidentally, that information was confirmed by the guy who plays Archer, John Benjamin, whose thesis was actually on those attempts to deport the Jews.
Didn't Hitler want to deport the Jews to Madagascar?
He was looking for a lot of different places, but they couldn't do it. So let's go back. Does Jeff Sessions have anything else to say, or is that basically the gist of the clip? Let's just listen to the rest of this guy's, this moron's talk. And Laura Ingraham, I mean, what a despicable human being. What a despicable way to make $1.
What's going on here?
Well, it's a real exaggeration. Of course, in Nazi Germany, they were keeping the Jews from leaving the country. But this is a serious matter. We need to think it through, be rational and thoughtful about it. We want to allow asylum for people who qualify for it, but people who want...
Incidentally, a week or two ago, they just narrowed the qualifications, right? Domestic abuse, fear of gang violence no longer constitute a reason for asylum. That's the game, right? We only let people in who qualify for asylum. What do you need to qualify for asylum? You need to be 11 feet tall. Sorry.
Asylum for people who qualify for it, but people who want economic migration for their personal financial benefit and what they think is their family's benefit is not a basis for a claim of asylum.
Oh, if you don't have access to food or safety, sorry. You're coming here. We gotta really, really cut back on all these immigrants who are coming in, and you know what they're doing? They're soaking up all the lottery winnings. Just despicable. What a just a horrible, racist human being. But wait, there's more. He's not the only despicable racist in the administration. This is is he acting?
Yeah, acting.
The acting director of, is it ICE or what are we calling that? Stasi now? This is the acting director of ICE. Incidentally, and I'm not the one who came up with this. I think it was that guy. It was McElwee. Sean McElwee. A significant portion of the people that this guy's organization deports have been in this country longer than the existence of that organization. When ICE deports someone who's been in this country for 20 years, understand that ICE has only been around for about 15. Just to be clear. Fortunately, they don't have a long and storied history of being Stasi.
No.
But here he is again. Hey, at least we're not Nazis.
And thank you for joining us. You've heard prominent people compare your behavior to that of the Nazis, to that of the Roosevelt administration in turning the Japanese during World War II. How do you respond?
I think it's an insult to the brave men and women of the Border Patrol and ICE to call law enforcement officers the Nazis. They're simply enforcing laws enacted by Congress. You know, I wish that there's this much outrage about separation of families. I wish I heard this much outrage when we met with angel mothers and fathers whose children were killed by illegal aliens, Jewish citizen children killed and separated from their families forever. I never heard this outrage. So I think people on the Hill...
Pause it. Actually, no, I think what we saw in those instances were people actually taken to trial and prosecuted.
Yeah, that's what we saw.
I am perfectly willing to make that trade. We will continue to prosecute anybody who murders somebody else, and then we will prosecute all of you. We'll start with you as the acting head of this body, and then we will prosecute everyone in middle management and on down. We were just following orders, is his address to the charge that we're not Nazis, we're following orders.
We're like the exact opposite, because the Nazis didn't follow orders. They were like renegades.
Right. They didn't even have uniform. Oh. Unbelievable. Is there any more to this? God.
We don't have any of this scumbag doing his like, why do they call you that? We don't have any of that, do we?
Oh.
God. All right, good.
Yeah, the real Nazis are the ones calling them Nazis for concentrating people into camps.
I didn't hear anybody expressing outrage when there were murders. Really? No? Like these people just, what would they do? They celebrated? Were they honored? Were they honored? These?
Oh my God, Hector got another white girl in San Francisco. Let's bring him to the Stevie Wonder concert at the White House.
Incidentally, that case in San Francisco, that person was exonerated.
And it was a total lie.
We're about to speak to the parent of one of those children killed in the way you described. Did you notice cable news anchors or Democratic politicians swooping in to comfort those families when their kids were killed?
No, I didn't. You know, the media the last few days, I've been incensed by the purposeful, the intentional misleading of the American people by politicians. And they say that the Trump administration wants to use these children as political pawns. The Trump administration isn't down there having political sideshows with these children and talking about this issue. The Trump administration wants Congress to fix this, and Congress has the authority to fix it. But what no one's talking about is the underlying reason for this whole argument. Are these families really escaping fear and persecution? The immigration court has said in the last year and a half, over 80% of these claims are frivolous. So first of all, we got to attack the very foundation.
No, they're not frivolous. They just don't qualify. And then what happens? They get sent back. There's a process. And just when we put you on trial, we're not going to predetermine the outcome. We're going to allow you to stand trial for your crimes against humanity. It would be unjust to simply say, hey, look, we were able to find guilty verdicts against these other people, so Homan must be guilty. No, you will get a trial. The law says that people get a hearing, even if 8 out of 10 get rejected. Continue.
They're arguing these people are coming to this country. These parents themselves are using these children as pawns to gain entry to the United States, knowing that we can't detain them. And as far as the separation of families are concerned, you have to put the blame on the parents. They are choosing to enter between the ports of entry. They know they will be separated, but they want to blame the government when we were forced to do that. So let's put the blame where it lies, not on the fine men and women of the Border Patrol and ICE. We're enforcing the law.
You guys are scumbags.
Absolute scumbags. You should all be in prison and ashamed of yourselves, socially shunned. It's disgusting.
Yeah. I'm not one for carceral solutions, but if anyone belongs in a gulag, it's the people who are doing this. Seriously.
We got all that infrastructure.
Look at that. That guy, that Thomas Homan, such a scumbag that you've even got Jamie calling for the erection of prisons to hold people like you. That's how horrible you are.
Maybe put him in his own prisons.
Exactly.
Save a little money.
There you go. Not even build new ones. Just empty out the ones and just...
For-profit prisons where the profits go to, like, DSA.
The profits get redistributed to Okay, the profits go to DSA, the guards are from MS-13, and he has to listen to Ani DeFranco all day.
And for those idiots who want to call in and tell me that this is just following the law, right? Who don't think this was just simply a decision, a choice to be made. Let's travel back in time. Almost a year plus ago, in fact, more than a year and 2 months ago, right around the time where they had developed this thing called video. And in March of 2017, video had been developed, and John Kelly went on to something called cable news, a network called CNN. And he was the Department of Homeland Security Secretary. And he had this idea about what he could do. Not because he had to follow the rule of law, because why would you even possibly contemplate sitting there on national television saying, I'm not sure if I should follow the rule of law or not? No, it was a policy decision. Let's listen to John Kelly way before he was pretending that he doesn't care if Donald Trump gets impeached because he thinks he's on the outs and he wants to seem like a human being once he gets out of this administration. Back when he thought his future was in this administration, and it's not that relevant that he's considered a human being. In fact, it's an asset to be considered a scumbag. Here he is talking to Wolf Blitzer.
Considering a new initiative that would separate
Pause
children.
it. A new initiative. This is a new initiative. Is it going to be a new way of following the rule of law, or is it just going to be a new policy, a new initiative? It's so disruptive, literally.
Considering a new initiative that would separate children from their parents if they try to enter the United States illegally.
Let me start by saying I would do almost anything to deter the people from Central America to getting on this very, very dangerous network that brings them up through Mexico into the United States. And I would underline that the Mexicans are.
Pause it.
Are
Would you advocate for more funding in these governments? Would you advocate for funding for NGOs to go down there and help them? Would you advocate for maybe stop deporting gang members to these countries and developing the gangs there? I mean, would you advocate for economic help so that there was some competition to working with cartels? I mean, what exactly? Would you do anything, or just the easy, most cruel things that you could do?
This network in the same way we are. It's extremely dangerous. I wouldn't say 100%, but certainly in the high 90%. And this is by the social service organizations that inform me from Central America that the vast majority of the young women, all women, are sexually abused along this trip. But my point
let
is...
Let me just be precise.
Right.
If you get some young kids who are managed to sneak into the United States with their parents, our Department of Homeland Security personnel going to separate the children from their moms and dads?
We have tremendous experience in dealing with unaccompanied minors. We turn them over to HHS, and they do a very, very good job of either putting them in kind of foster care or linking them up with parents or family members in the United States. Yes, I am considering, in order to deter more movement along this terribly dangerous network, I am considering exactly that. They will be well cared for as we deal with their parents.
Yeah, there you go.
Wow, that is some next level concern trolling.
Yeah, not to mention, he also doesn't say the word asylum seekers, which they're doing it too, right?
Just admit that you don't care about these people.
No, I'm so concerned. I'm so concerned that there's going to be abuse there, that I'm doing it for their sake.
Maybe you people don't care, but I'm super radically concerned about human trafficking and whatnot. They take these broads over borders and whatever. So the answer is you got to rip babies out of their mother's arms, or the cartels win. Yeah. You know what I'm saying, Wolf? You're a Jew. You're able to think abstractly.
Calling from a 203 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey,
Sam. This is Jay.
Hello, Jay from Connecticut.
Oh, yeah. I forgot to tell you, I'm from Connecticut. I was feeling very negative. I can get a negative vibe from you also this past couple of days.
Yeah.
So I think we're sort of reading the same news sources.
Right.
I'm going to switch over to the regular phone, if you don't mind.
No, I don't mind. I'm trying to show patience.
Yeah, you bought some currency for yourself there with that negative.
Well, I was listening before. You had a new system for picking up calls today, I heard, while I was on hold.
What was that?
So I was thinking that you're going to start at the bottom of the list and not give privilege to the people who call first.
That's right. I'm mixing it up a little bit.
Because I don't want to disrupt. Because, the Chris Lopaco is trying to call in, and he's got that thing where he went to see Jordan Peterson last night, and he disrupted the event and got thrown out.
Jay, what are you doing here, buddy?
All right, Jay,
You're
I
like
appreciate
talking
that.
yourself into getting hung up.
I don't see him on the list anymore, but okay.
Or maybe he's in jail.
All right, well.
I like how Jay's like, hey, how you doing? I'm in a terrible mood. Sounds like you are too. Hold on, let me get on my other phone. There's other callers that are better than me.
Well, now...
All right, Jay, you get 10 seconds to make it
parody,
worthwhile
so it
for
works
me to
really
stay on the
well.
line.
I can work
Let's
with
hear it.
anything.
Let's
Grist
go.
for the mill.
Well, I, as I was reading the paper yesterday, I noticed that just a blurb about water rights in India, and it occurred to me that they're getting the Fortress America ready and Fortress Europe ready in anticipation of the global South starting to become catastrophic. And this is how they intend to deal with something like that. Or I think what you're going to see unfold if they do have an actual water issue in India, it's not going to be like a gradual thing or sort of just a chronic problem. It's going to be a sort of a meltdown of their whole civilization. They apparently have tapped up all their groundwater, depending on Himalayan water now, pretty much for everything. So it occurs to me that I don't know if Trump is clever enough, but I think certain people are anticipating that they'll be able to point to other countries and make the case for sealing up the borders in the United States. I sent you a link to a woman who is from Australia who has a green card, and she was hassled at the border, and the immigration officer also confiscated her green card while she was there.
Jeez.
And so it's a new policy of even going after citizens aggressively now. So I think they have a bigger plan than just hassling children. I think right now
this is I want to just note really briefly. Chila Bimbe wrote a piece called "The Age of Humanism is Ending" in December 22nd, 2016, for a South African magazine called Mail and Guardian, and this is exactly what he outlined. Precisely that synergy of resource depletion, and that Gaza is a future model of how all developed countries will relate to underdeveloped and environmental refugees. I think you're totally on point.
It wouldn't shock me, and I mean, certainly, like, it always occurred to me the reason why Canada is now requiring a passport when you come across the border is because they're also thinking like, there's no guarantee that it doesn't hit the States either. I mean, United States of America. So
that's why. That's why Trump has put them on notice that they are a potential security threat. Canada has 95% of the surface fresh water on Earth, which is not lost on the Department of Defense in the United States, to be sure, or anywhere.
I bet.
So, yeah.
I mean, we need to make them. We need to soften them up a little bit, is what you're saying, so that we can move in. I mean, look, it's. I don't know if Donald Trump has that type of foresight. I suspect he does not. Maybe a guy like Miller.
Does.
I get maybe, or maybe
think
a guy
Miller
like Bannon, though. You know, in his like little fevered swamp head, is he thinking about stuff like this in these terms?
That's literally.
I bet.
That
I think that's
French
what he's been calling for.
fascist
Right.
novel that he loves.
Yeah.
That's the whole premise of it. The heroes of that book murder refugees coming on boats into France from across.
But Jay, I really
African-
appreciate your calling and cheering me up. Thanks, buddy.
Well, I just wanted to hear if Michael really could work with any material whatsoever.
Good day, sir.
And did I
Good
not?
day. He
Everything from Mocking Your Call to Achille Bimbe. Boom.
Calling from a, let's see, 614 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from? Hello? Hello?
Hi.
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 Hello? Your phone is bad. Sorry. That's the nice thing about getting someone who hasn't been waiting for very long. I can be a little bit more brutal. Calling from a 501 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hi, Sam. This is Cindy from Arkansas.
Hello, Cindy. What's on your mind?
Well, first, let me apologize for being from the same state as that dipweed from yesterday.
Nice.
Don't hold it against
That's
you.
a beautiful.
I do not hold it against
Now
you.
that is a strong call.
I'm
opener.
sorry. I'm sorry that you have to live in that same state as that dickweed.
I do. Listen, is that the way that guy thinks or not thinks is 99% of the state.
Oy.
And so I don't think that people in the north actually understand how bad it is down here. One of the reasons that this stuff about Trump and all these terrible things he's doing is because people have been conditioned by the Republican Party in these states over the last 25 years that minorities, no matter what their nationality, are not human. They're less than human because they're white. So therefore, when you relegate people to less than human, then it makes it easier to do the kind of stuff that we've got going on now.
Yep. It's true.
And in Arkansas, we got 95% of, this type of thing. These people also, they had last week, they were talking on a few shows about, is this voting Republican a cult? And I'm going to tell you, it is a cult, not cult-like. It is a cult. These people would have to be taken out and deprogrammed because not only are they not listening to anything except for their bubble, they are absolutely convinced that everyone else is lying, that is not in the bubble. And, their perception is not incorrect. Like, there was a guy in the chat room that actually made the comment that guy yesterday owned you. What? I mean, that guy
I was
couldn't
drunk.
even speak English. He could barely speak. I'm sorry.
Wow.
With
Go ahead.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Okay. Okay, that's okay. And then I want to I wanted to agree with you about a point you had a couple of weeks ago. Tom Cotton is from Arkansas. Tom Cotton is dangerous. He is ambitious. His family has groomed him since a kid to become president. He sits up there and votes against things that would help Arkansas all the time, year after year, and they keep, voting this guy back in. And his big persona was that, he was a veteran and patriotic. Well, where's he now? So, we got people, traitors, and where's this patriotic guy now? And he's hiding. He hides from Trump. Hides from the media unless he wants to come on and say something outrageous, like being on the same stage. When he was one of the architects of the immigrants by half, legal immigration by half.
Right.
And he's been running for president the day he was put in the city.
I know it. And that's
And
why it was a
right.
good thing he didn't get, and hopefully keep him out of, the CIA. He wanted to be CIA head. But
could I ask him real quick? What's he? I mean, I guess you already answered this because of how you talked about the politics there. But is he pretty popular in Arkansas? He's a popular guy.
Yes, he's very popular.
All right.
Because, first of all, he's a Republican, and anybody that's a Republican is very popular.
Right.
Even though we're the most poor state in the union, where the boom that's supposed to be going on in this economy is not hitting areas like Arkansas and the South and these rural areas. There are no jobs here. Most of the people are on some type of service, and then they sit there and gripe about other minorities being on the services of the state.
Right.
I mean,
Well,
it's
listen.
like they live in a world that doesn't compute.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
How do you think people get this way? Because we have had a lot of debates on here about the various factors, whether it's economic anxiety, messages from corporate media, or maybe people are just assholes. Like, where do you come down on this?
Okay, I know where this came from. In the early 80s, actually people in Arkansas were much more liberal. And they were much more liberal. We had a lot of Democrats in office. But when Jerry Falwell started his moral majority and got in bed with the Republicans, and all right-wing media started, and now their preachers are telling them only to vote Republican. And the rhetoric was just, ratcheted up a little bit and a little bit and a little bit. So now these people actually believe that Democrats are evil people possessed by the devil. As crazy as this sounds, because they have been programmed this by their preachers, by their other friends, by right-wing media. And I knew in 1980, I told people this right-wing media was going to ruin this country. And it has. Because these people do not live in anything close to reality. So we've got a whole millions of people walking around this country that are basically in an alternate reality with alternate facts. And there is nothing you can do to change these people's minds. To them, it's a battle of good, and it just so happens they're white, so they're good.
Right.
So what's happened?
And it's not going to get any better. I bet there's one or two new Sinclair media stations in Arkansas.
And by the way,
one.
this is something you can't see a global pattern on, because you could see like the same thing when the left was destroyed in the Middle East, the rise of the kind of Islamic equivalent of these type of extremist preachers, and how that connected with. That is actually when we talk about the conflicts between like how this stuff does intersect with oligarchs, the media stuff's really simple, because you like, look who's funding the channels.
Yep.
And then who creates the content that brainwashes people.
And there's nothing like a good, healthy dose of right-wing religiosity.
And the same thing in India. That's why Modi's prime minister, the same fusion of the far-right Hindu Veda politics and their fusion. Gujarat, under Modi, had a mass killing of Muslims, 5,000, I believe, in 2 days, raped, killed, and at the bare minimum, the security services looked the other way. And Gujarat, also under his leadership, was the lead in India's tech economy. So it can work together. I hope you'll call in again. That was fascinating. I'm going to also do an illicit history for TMBS on Jerry Falwell. That sounds perfect.
Well,
appreciate the call. Thank you so much.
I mean, I try to call in all the time, but this is the first day I got in. Love the show. I'll try to call in another time. Thank you.
Okay. That's why I'm switching around the thing.
Oh,
I mean, that is the story, and you look into what Paul Weyrich was I think the
was
guy,
he the direct mail guy?
Yeah, and he was I think pretty instrumental. Was it Paul Weyrich? I'm pretty sure, who was instrumental in sort of like bringing those evangelicals, because prior to that, the idea was leave unto Caesar what is Caesar's. And the religious and the political did not mix. And Jerry Falwell was an innovator in that regard. So, all right, here's an example of what you can do. people are like, and we had a caller who called in, said she's going to take pictures. She's going to print out pictures of the children and go out and stand in front of churches. I mean, really, anything you do that is in any way disruptive, I think, is a very positive is a positive thing. It doesn't have to have any real intention beyond letting some other people that don't know you, that you think this is a problem. I mean, I actually think that in terms of when you talk about fighting a trend in society, doing something like that is actually, doesn't necessarily, I don't know if that works 100% of the time with each action you take, but sustained actions like that will have a positive impact. And certainly, if you happen to have the opportunity to go by an ICE detention in Portland, Oregon, and start yelling at ICE officers, that can help too. Here is folks from last night, Occupy ICE PDX.
From Direct Action Alliance in Portland.
From the Direct Action Alliance in Portland, Oregon, last night. Standing outside and making ICE people feel embarrassed for themselves, hopefully.
You guys are separating children from their families. You know what? If you believe in a border, fine, but why the fuck are you tearing families apart? What is wrong with you?
You're making these conscious choices to work.
What is wrong with you?
You're making the conscious choice.
There is something wrong with your head. There are families being torn apart. That is what you do.
There's other jobs for you, man.
You don't have to do this.
You really don't have to.
You don't have to fucking work for an agency that destroys lives. You do not need to work for people who destroy lives. You can be better than that. Don't your kids deserve to have a father who isn't a fucking Nazi?
Yep.
Don't your kids deserve to have a father who isn't going to be in the history books for fucking committing crimes against humanity? That is where you're headed. You guys are dying off. You're about to be outnumbered. We are taking this country back. And there are embassies that are going to fucking find you. You guys are committing a crime against humanity.
It takes a matter of time.
It doesn't matter how you fucking view it, that you're standing up for your country. The reality of it, the fucking basic truth of it is you are separating families. You are a monster. You are a monster.
Abolish ICE! 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 Why don't you want to spend
All right, there it is, and they're basically standing in front of a nice vehicle as the guy's trying to leave. I mean, I think he figures out another way of going, but.
Unafraid! Undocumented! Unafraid! Undocumented! Unafraid! Undocumented! Unafraid! Undocumented! Unafraid! Undocumented!
Why don't you get a job that doesn't tear families apart? Why don't you go work at Whole Foods? Just quit your job.
Quit your job.
You're better than this. You're fucking better than this. You're better than this. Fucking wake up. You're better than this.
Reversing.
Unafraid. Undocumented. Unafraid.
There you go.
Whole Foods
good
does
stuff.
probably tear some families apart, to be fair.
Good stuff.
Yeah,
For any number of reasons.
First of all, they get
That is great.
They generally have two separate lines where sometimes if you're with somebody else, they can be
whoa.
separate.
Now I think you're giving us an unintentional door into things here.
I
You
stopped-
get on that other line.
I
No,
think
I want my line.
I actually stopped by that one on Flatbush today.
Yeah,
for the
how?
first
Oh,
time.
really? I haven't been in there.
The strawberries are actually cheaper than the place that I usually
Well, you know
shop,
what's so
but that's
messed
about
up about New York is I read, man, I forget where I read this, but like a year ago, like actually inside New York City, Whole Foods is not standout expensive at all.
No.
Which,
not surprising.
yeah.
I hope we see a lot more, and I think we will see a lot more actions like this around the country.
I think so too. I get that feeling.
And
I think people are it's too much. Now, ladies and gentlemen, yes, the Trump administration in the Republican Party. Remember, there are 49 Democratic senators who have signed on to a bill that would end this. There is 0 Republican senators who have signed on to this bill. I should say one of those folks, obviously an independent right now, but and Bernie Sanders, or 2.
King
and-
backed this too, right?
There are 0 Republicans. So, I mean, this is really, we can call about the Trump administration, but this is the Republican Party. Let's not kid ourselves. It's totally the Republican Party that is involved in what's going on at the border. But Donald Trump, sharp enough to know that while we are paying attention to what's going on at the border, what we don't have is our space flank covered, right? Because we're looking down on terrestrial issues. But Donald Trump, this is what makes him such a great leader. He's also thinking about potential dangers that may be coming extraterrestrially.
The essence of the American character is to explore new horizons and to tame new frontiers.
Pause it. There he is, Donald Trump expressing both that he has received the medication that he needs to be able to deliver a speech, and that the United States, if there is anywhere that exists where we have not in some way tried to send a military force or extend our imperialism, that's got to change.
Also, let me just say, the assignment to dub Independence Day with is obvious.
New horizons and to tame new frontiers. But our destiny beyond the earth is not only a matter of national identity, but a matter of national security. So important for our military. So important. And people don't talk about it.
People don't talk
When it comes to defending America, it is not enough to merely have an American presence in space. We must have American dominance in space. So important. Very importantly, I'm hereby directing the Department of Defense and Pentagon to immediately begin the process necessary to establish a Space Force as the 6th branch of the armed forces. That's a big statement. We are going to have the Air Force and we are going to have the Space Force, separate but equal. It is going to be something.
Separate but equal.
I don't know if that's a
Separate
Freudian
but
slip.
equal.
It just was. I'm just talking points you're getting.
Can
That
we
was
play,
from the briefing that Jeff's
Can we
going to do
play
next week.
the new anthem of the new? There it is. Look at what I've written for you, folks. I've created an entirely new anthem for our Space Force.
You know,
There
a
it
lot
is.
of people thought that Luke and Leia should have been able to get together, even though they were brother and sister. Maybe even if they were, I don't know, father and daughter as an
That's right.
example.
There's
A lot of
nothing
people
wrong
are
with
saying
that.
that.
Space
A lot of
Force.
people are saying there's
Separate,
yeah,
but equal. But equal.
Hey,
But
Colin,
also,
hey, Colin, why don't you kneel for this one?
Can you
Colin.
effing believe?
Hey, why don't you
this
lead
guy
kneel for
separate
space?
equal? It's just like, it's just.
Oh, I'm sorry. I read Jeff's briefing book again.
What did they-
Anyways, can we go into space?
Didn't we demilitarize space a while ago? Or
Yeah,
am I
but
just
it's pretty.
imagining
It's
things?
pretty important for military.
The boss wants to.
Maybe-
The boss wants to have a space force.
Maybe
All
he
right,
got
tell him
a
to have
hold-
space force.
maybe
Could
he
you,
read-
Can
Stephen,
there be slums in space?
Jimmy, could you write up a speech where he introduces the space force? Great, and will you throw in some historic, racist, bromides?
Maybe
Separate but equal.
Maybe he
Separate
How
got,
did Dad get a hands in this
That's right.
speech?
Yeah, this is great.
maybe he got a hold of a book on Posadism, and he's worried about the space comrades coming to give us communism on Earth.
Gotta
really
be very
doubt
worried
that.
about that.
I
Gotta
really
be
doubt
very
that.
worried. We need to
What
have
you
full space I mean,
just dominance. Separate but equal, but also dominant.
Separate, equal from the Navy, however, going to be more obviously. We could have done it with the Navy because we could have had ships that go from the water into space. But we didn't. We did that with the Air Force. So we
gotta
separate but equal.
You got to budget a little bit out of whack, Air Force.
We have to preserve fully automated, straight luxury space fascism. Okay, people.
I can't tell whether or not I want.
Why couldn't Luke get with Leia? I could never
Donald
understand
Trump
that part of the movie.
to be in Iraq.
My sister's a
in
dog,
the
though. She's a
Smithsonian
judge.
After his term is served out in Iraq in the Smithsonian, so people can walk by while he's still up, or to just have his brain on display. To just see, like, if you could actually see the physical malnormities.
Oh, are you kidding me? I think his brain would be the type of thing that even children could just.
Holy
be like,
crap!
Oh, what's
Could you
wrong
look
with
at
that?
Like, why is that rotted?
What's happening there? Why is that part corroded, mommy?
If you press that button, is the one that says separate but equal. The Air Force and the Space Force.
I finally said
That's a
it.
big thing that I just did. I said Space Force. I said it's totally separate. It's a big thing that I did.
Black people are the Air Force, but white people are the Space Force. Both important and good, but one better than the other.
Let's go to the I am hard math. I have a serious problem with your invoking Hitler's early actions against the Jews. Stop the hyperbole. This is entirely unfair to 1930s Hitler, who was obviously not nearly as bad as 1940s Hitler. Not only are you being unfair to 1930s Hitler, your invoking minimizes the evil of the 1940s Hitler.
I literally can see.
Right?
I know.
Right?
I even
Which
know
caller?
the Twitter handles.
Which caller is going to say that to me? You're calling from a 913 area code. Are you upset that I have invoked 1930s Hitler to malign and maligning them by comparing them to 1940s Hitler?
Hey, Sam, this is Kevin.
Hi, Kevin.
From Kansas City.
What's on your mind, Kevin?
Not at all upset about that.
All right. Appreciate
But,
that. Yep.
Sorry. I'm a mailman, actually.
All right.
So you're witnessing a little bit of action. I apologize.
No problem. What do you do in that situation? Do you just hustle or what?
Get away as fast as possible.
All right.
But so I have a couple things. First off, I'd like to point out a small ironic point related to Dave Rubin on Joe Rogan's podcast.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm pretty nervous right now.
That's all right.
But
so far so good.
So the other day, David Rubin kind of discussed maybe privatizing the post office or something like that.
Yes, it was
Having
one of,
Amazon.
honestly, like I felt like a normal person would have to study for like a number of years to say something that stupid if they were being conscious about
Because
it.
then you got Amazon and then drones and then
Right.
blah, 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 and then the price will go down.
Yes, exactly.
He literally said that. It's a verbatim quote.
Exactly. That he's discussing that when there's a thing with the post, we have contracts with the likes of Amazon and UPS and FedEx called the last mile.
Yeah.
Where we will deliver parcels to. Hello?
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. So we will deliver their parcels for them to rural areas where they do not want to access.
Of course.
Because it will save them money.
Of course.
So he's saying this literally, I think, the day after Ohio, or the Supreme Court decision in Ohio to allow for voter repression
right.
after 6 years, when the way that these people would be notified, essentially,
Would be over the post. Yeah,
Right.
no, I
People
got
would
it.
Can you guys hear me very well? I
Yeah,
think
no,
my
you're breaking
reception's
up a
not
little
good.
bit. You're breaking up. I mean, I hate to tell you to stop walking around because you're a postman, but you need to stop walking around.
competition would start kicking in.
We're losing
in a
you.
bad,
We're
bad
losing.
area. But were you able to hear my point there? I just think it's
Well, your point was
unfortunate that
your point was that Ohio, the Supreme Court had just said it was legitimate for Ohio to kick people off the voting rolls if they don't respond to a letter that's been sent to them because of their voter inactivity. And the idea that you would put that in the hands of a private enterprise who has no profit motive in delivering those letters.
no incentive at all.
No incentive whatsoever.
Exactly.
I mean, of course.
You guys aren't thinking like entrepreneurs, though. If
But
you're
like
like
you
the
say,
Koch brothers, you're
the fact of the
Then
matter
they don't
is,
get the mail.
But I
Then
think
they go
even-
to jail.
But that is a far more nuanced take than even I would anticipate from a Dave Rubin. I'm saying that to not be aware of the fact that it is not profitable to deliver a letter, a 42-cent letter, a 44-cent letter to a house in rural Kansas, to not be aware of that is to be so dumb as to make one question how it is you were able to dress yourself to actually go. Like, the only thing that in any way made it possible for me to accept that he was there is that he wasn't wearing a button-down shirt, because I don't think that one could articulate that and also have the ability to button your clothes.
It is so hard to not use a very unwoke R word when talking about Dave Rubin.
It is.
It is a daily punishing challenge. I mean, on air. Obviously, off air, I say that.
That's great. I appreciate you guys addressing that point. I did want to ask one question, if I could.
Please.
And that would be, I really appreciate you guys' coverage of the separation of families at the border. And really listening to you specifically, your focus more is on the people that are seeking asylum. So their new policy of not allowing people that are trying to escape gang violence.
I'm sorry.
Call
You're
back,
breaking
please.
up. You're breaking up. I'm sorry. I mean,
Okay. Thanks, guys.
Okay, thanks. Sorry. I just couldn't make out what you're saying. I love Sarah Palin. Ann Coulter's comment about the browning of America and that study a few years ago that said whites would no longer be the majority by like 2050 is driving the Republican Party. That comment the other day by the guy running for office exposed their real motives. The white identity party is trying to entrench themselves. The media is doing a better job, but they're still prepared for this moment. Register and vote. I know progressives don't like to do it, but as an alt-centrist, I'll do it for you. I have a really nice TV. Laura Ingraham needs to worry less about immigrant kids and worry more about doing something about those wrinkles so she could land them.
Oh, no.
Nice.
Yeah, that's what we're going to criticize her for.
Among everything else.
Carl Hungus.
Get him.
Can Ronald Reagan please give some advice about hiring an asylum seeker or immigrant as a nanny or housekeeper? I have 2 young boys go to daycare, and I would rather give someone an opportunity to come to America than pay a daycare facility. Looks to be almost impossible to get work visa. If you're an asylum seeker, I want to find a way. I have an extra space for them to live downstairs and would love to sponsor someone's visa. You know what? Reach out to him, Ronald Reagan, on Twitter, Yakima Abrigado. Is it Abrigado?
Abogado.
Nick from Manitoba. Sam, you asked if these people have a shred of humanity, but where's your humanity in bringing up a libertarian at the top of the show without there being a debate? Great interview today since you all mentioned coal in passing. Have you ever read Killing for Coal by Thomas Andrews? I haven't. It's an incredibly fascinating book on the Ludlow massacre and an in-depth look at the events leading up to it, especially labor conditions. Try it out. Lastly, I can't get enough of you on MR. What's your deal with Chris Hayes? How often do you go on? Can I catch your appearances in All In Podcast? Usually is during a certain block of the show. No, it's all over. I was booked last night, but I got bumped. I maybe tonight. It's usually once a week.
Hi, Chris.
I may be doing Ari Melber this week. It just depends on what the
Good
news
to be
is.
back. Republicans have been doing this forever.
That's honestly, like, that is what I think my job is on that show.
It is.
It is like
it's literally it's like ombudsman of like they call it. I forget who coined this term. It's not me, but I cannot remember who did it. But they talked about Trump laundering, like this, like laundering the Republican Party's sins through Trump.
Yes, And I'm brought in to just say, like, wait, stop, sorry. Everything you're saying has been going on for years. And that's, I think, when they bring me in. And so I think a lot of times my appearance is contingent upon one of the Never Trumpers being available, so that I can come in and just sort of say, wait, excuse me. I agree with the sentiment, but let me just remind it was that person's fault too.
So
like that's like
it's just perfect. Actually,
that's
it's like the only thing restoring some sanity to MSNBC, if I could use that phrase.
It's. I mean,
with regard to that,
I feel like
particular
every host should have one of those, like so that when they bring on their Never Trumper guest, they can still be polite and they can just like press a button, and it's like it's basically like me going
I don't think so.
That's basically it. Let me just, instead of like hitting that, I'm just going to tap Sam and he'll just say, wait a second. Max in Maryland. America was created as a proto-fascist state based on native genocide and slavery. The Nazis got the legal framework for us. In the words of Reverend Wright, goddamn America. I can't remember the book, but we did have someone on who discussed how the legal framework for Nazi Germany came from the United States. We
Hitler's American Model. I forget who wrote it.
it was a guy
that's why
at
we brought
Yale.
Matt.
Hold
That's
on.
why Matt was hired on the show, because he's got like a near encyclopedic.
James Whitman.
James Whitman.
Yeah, that's why when everyone's like, "This is un-American. This is not America." Like, what America have you been living in?
Hitler's American Model: the United States and the Making of Nazi Race Law.
JJ Cool. Thanks, Sam and crew, for your tireless work fighting these white supremacist scum. I'm Canadian, but I have loved ones in the States and from Central America and worry every day how they'll be treated and what happened to them. Thames Darwin. Sam, as you might know, I'm a Holocaust historian, but still find the term oven-ready beta cuck funny. Good points about the fluidity of Nazi Jewish policy. The ice guys remind me of what is known as the myth of the Wehrmacht in Germany. Even as the SS and Nazis were being put on trial, the idea persisted that the army was blameless with this same "how dare you" tone. It's disgusting. Also, listen to Dissident Peasants podcast with me on how the Nazis cashed in all the while. Check it out. Man, it's like a whole podcast community. Horka Sporka Gorka. I thought I was 100% straight, but dang it, Sam using F-bombs on the immigration caller yesterday shifted me somewhere on the Kinsey scale.
That'll keep the testosterone flowing.
Oh, yeah. Dude, look at it.
Wow. That was a real recovery from not knowing about the Nazi law book.
He did know the Nazi law book. That's the thing.
I think that might be. Wow,
Super
that is
quick.
up there. That is an elite.
There's a few I have on hockey.
That was, dude. Wait a second. Was that tweet from you? Was that I am from you?
I don't know how to I am the show.
Yes. Bull Prague.
Don't take that away from him. He killed that.
Jordan Peterson spouts propaganda from the John Birch Society, and the Chris Lepaco is a hard body cutie. Where is Lepaco? I don't see him anywhere. We're going to have to check that out. He'll have to call in tomorrow. Rural Progressive Okie. Here in my state house district in Oklahoma, one of our Democratic candidates who's been knocking on doors told me that no one has asked any questions about raising the minimum wage or anything to do with labor. The median family income in his district is $30,000. It's a very working class district, and the only questions people are asking are about education and guns. The establishment and the local media have convinced everyone in the state that our only problems are education. Not to mention we're one of the poorest states in the country, and every other government agency has been cut drastically since 2010. What do you all think about this? I mean, I think, part of the job is to make people aware of what problems can be dealt with by government. And, sometimes it's a lack of imagination on some level that can be awakened.
Well, people are so beaten down at this point in time like the unionization rate in the private sector is so low. It's something like what, less than 30% or less
Oh my
than
God.
No, it's like
7%.
less than, yeah, it's like
7%. Okay, I think I mixed up public private, but
Yes.
it's so low, and people are so beaten down. They don't even know it's an option. They don't even think it's an option. And that is one job that we have as alternative media, to spread the idea and the consciousness that people can ask for more and should ask for more, and that they have power as workers, even if they don't realize they do at first.
Indeed. Gulag Greg, have any of you read American Fascist by Chris Hedges? I'm halfway through, and it seems to confirm exactly what the good caller from Arkansas said. Diane Rush. Drya Nosh. Greetings from Tucson, Sammy. I've decided I will not comply with the voluntary disclosures at the inland CPB checkpoints. And I encourage fellow listeners to do the same. ICE does not deserve our voluntary compliance or respect. Good for you. Videotape it and send it to us. F. Sam's Apples. My father was denied both asylum and regular immigration to the U.S. in 1983. Then he decided to fly over on a tourist visa and just stay. My mother did the same thing when he established some roots. The immigration system here was a joke then, and it's even worse now. They are both citizens now, but it was a long and arduous process. They did not accept he could support himself, despite the company he started grossing over $4 million a year and employing at its height over 75 people. Regardless, that should not be a major factor. He was pumping gas for the first couple of years. People have potential. We need immigration reform now, indeed. Chewy, I would really love you guys to cut a video of Cindy's call. As a South Carolinian, I agree with her on the genesis of this stuff. Matt, keep an eye on that. Andrew from Boise. Fox News and Breitbart comment sections have been using the foreign invaders term for a while now. It's the obvious next step. I really got scared when I first saw that language. All right, we got about another 15 minutes. I'll go to the phones. Calling from a 585 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, Sam. This is Rebecca Louisville. How you doing?
Hi, Rebecca. Your phone is a little bit shaky today for whatever reason.
Oh, okay. From here.
Try it one more
I
time.
really apologize. Is that any better? Is that any better?
Getting there. Try one more time.
So I live at the I apologize. It's better.
I'm sorry.
Okay, I'll let go, Sam. I'll try again. Thanks.
Okay. Bye-bye. Sorry about that. Calling from an 886 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from? 886.
Hey, this is Chris from Taiwan.
Hey, Chris from Taiwan. What's on your mind?
So I listened to that audio of the children in those detention centers.
Oh, yeah. Do we have?
And it was just horrific. I work with children every day, and I've seen any number of children screaming and crying like they were being tortured, just because mommy and daddy were leaving them for the day.
Yeah.
And, I've seen in their eyes just how painful that is. And shortly after I listened to that, I also read the piece that George Takei from Star Trek put out. He was actually interned during the Japanese internment during World War II.
Yeah.
And he wrote a whole article. The title is something like, "At least when I was interned, they didn't rip me away from my family," or something like that.
Right.
And so I've been thinking, and you guys kind of alluded to this earlier, once we put a stop to this and hopefully get past this and get new leadership in Washington, I really think there needs to be a legal reckoning for the people who participated in this, of the kind that there never was for the torturers in the Bush administration.
Yep.
I think we ought to have a South African or Brazilian style Truth and Reconciliation Commission, where there are investigations and trials and reparations, and the high level architects and participants of this policy get called out and hopefully punished. We can't let this stand. even if we get rid of the people who created this policy, like I really think they need to suffer some sort of consequences. It's just so horrific.
I agree with you. I mean, there, you know, and we are long overdue for accountability for things that that shock the conscience. And I would say that, you know, I mean, I think we could find some examples across, you know, many administrations, our past administrations, but at least, you know, it should be hanging out there at the very least as a threat, because, you know, people need to know that you know, the whimsy in which they do these things is just there'll be consequences. Appreciate the phone call. Let's go to calling from a 605 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hi, Sam. This is Dylan from South Dakota.
Hi, Dylan. What's on your
I
mind?
wanted to talk a little bit about the interview, actually. My mom is from North Dakota, where they're doing fracking up there.
Yeah.
I still have family up there, so like they do have mineral rights. Like I don't think anybody really sold theirs in North Dakota as opposed to Appalachia, which is it really sucks for Appalachia. But like my aunt and uncle that still live there, like they've had problems with companies and how they run their operations. Just a couple weeks ago, I saw them and they were talking about how like some contractor was put a power line to a drilling pad that's across the road from their house, and he just like put it on their land rather than going around it without any sort of permission. And the company is just trying to stonewall them when he says like, you need to like pay for this to be on my land or else I'm going to get rid of it.
Wow.
Like they're just trying to ignore him and bring him through the courts, but he's a pretty stubborn guy, so I think he's going to win out because like they got no permission whatsoever and there's no easements.
It's all about,
And,
in
a
those
couple years
situations,
ago-
it's all about just like we can just outlast you in court, and you know, you're not going to expend the amount that it would cost us to move it.
Yeah. And then a couple of years ago, they had a different problem where they were leaving the tailings from the fracking like out there. And like eventually, after complaining enough, my aunt and uncle got them to agree to truck it out, but they didn't want to truck everything out. So they decided to light it on fire first to get rid of like all the dirt and whatnot.
Jesus.
Yeah,
Horrible.
so that's all I got.
All right. Well, I appreciate it. Thanks for rounding that out for us.
There should be like a fracking
Thank you.
crimes. I'm sure there probably is, but like a clearinghouse or something.
Yeah. Well, you know, Josh Fox's movies cover a lot of that stuff. I mean, particularly in Pennsylvania. 878 area code. Where are you calling from? Who's this?
Hello?
Hello? Who's this?
Hi, this is Nick from Pittsburgh.
What's on your mind, Nick?
First, a few things quick before I wanted to recommend you guys a couple videos. But first, to Jamie and Matt, I started listening to your podcast this weekend, and I'm enjoying both of those a lot.
Oh, thank you.
So thanks for those.
Thanks, man.
To Michael, I don't know if you saw, but the amazing atheist T.J. Kirk did a video going after you. Not really. I guess you mentioned him in passing.
Yeah, that I heard
week.
about this. I heard about this, and it was funny because the video that we did, I guess somebody put his picture on the video, which now I understand why he's upset, because the actual content is Dave from Jamaica being like, that guy's an asshole. And I'm like, who is that guy? And apparently that was enough to do like a 20-minute video out of it. I don't know. I guess I heard his fifis. I mean, I don't know. I hope he feels better. But look, I'm not going to respond to anything more you say because you didn't mention my show in that lineup. So F you. I'm going to do a 20-minute video about you.
Oh, dude. No, dude. I like your show.
Don't say anything or you're going to be hung up on.
Show,
Do not say another word or you're going to be hung up on.
Shh,
All
Sam,
right.
be respectful of the
All right,
caller.
let's all right, continue.
You know, you're saying you like my call,
Let's
sir.
go. We don't have much
Thanks.
time.
Patron?
Yeah, sorry. So, yeah, and congratulations to you, Sam, for going over 300,000. So, just really quickly, I don't know if you'll use it or not, I did see, and I started to watch some of it. Dave Rubin was actually invited to the Oxford Union and was being interviewed in Oxford, of all places. I don't really know. I've seen a lot of right-wingers get interviewed there. I'm hoping the students push back against him. Didn't really get a lot of time to check that out, but
wow.
I
When
thought
was
maybe
that?
you
Was
guys
that
could
recent?
check that out.
Is that recent? Oh
I
God!
think
All
it
right,
was
I'll
like
look at it. I'll look at it.
within the last 24
Jesus.
hours.
Hard to keep
and,
I'm on it.
You guys, sorry.
All right.
You guys know who Sargon of Akkad is?
Oh God!
All right, goodbye.
Good day, sir.
Goodbye. What is this guy's like a clearinghouse for every like mental midget on YouTube? Hey, by the way, did you know this other really horrible shut-in who does video?
You got 10 seconds. Go, because I gotta jump. I want to get something meaningful.
Check out a video from him that's really despicable but kind of hilarious called "Black Women Need to Take Personal Responsibility." And please just pass that.
That's the name of the new podcast I'm doing with Brendan.
Right, that's great.
All right, thanks. See you guys.
Didn't you debate that guy, Michael?
I did. Sargon of Akkad.
Yeah.
All right.
This is the debate where like I still get crap because people think I was muting Sargon's feed.
Yes,
it was
the
just
big-
Michael and him talking over each other on Skype.
The big conspiracy was that he was muted. I don't know. That was a nightmare. I was like harassed by the most like deranged versions for weeks. Like ad hominem, de facto ad hominem.
All right.
Sir.
The final call of the day, 510. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, Sam. This is former ICE agent, current Whole Foods employee, Tony from San Jose.
Tony, how are you? What's on your mind?
So, a couple things. I want to talk about messaging, getting your messages out. You know, during the campaign, Trump said that we should kill family members of terrorists.
Yep.
Trump said we should punish abortion-seeking women, whatever that means. You know, he got his message out, right? That was his message, and it attracted, you know, a certain level of scumbag.
Right.
Now, what you did yesterday to that fucking douche from Arkansas was a masterclass, and that needs to be clipped and sent out to every progressive organization in America to tell people how to talk to these fucking idiots, because that got the message out better than any mealy-mouthed corporate Democrat could ever imagine to.
Well, I imagine that would not be the greatest stump speech if I was going to run for office, but I'm afforded a little more latitude. But
I think as debating and positioning, because those people are all about, like, they actually are. They choose to live in a world that is, in fact, all about dominance and hierarchy
Right.
and who gets the better of exchange. So give it right back to them.
yes, but I
Right,
appreciate it.
That's exactly how it needs to be done, because that shows strength, that shows dominance, that shows, you know, what these people respect, even though they shouldn't garner any respect for their idiotic views. That will break through to them, and they'll be like, "Oh, this guy in the glasses just ripped me a new asshole. He's obviously right."
Well,
and I'm
I
gonna
will
go
tell
with
you,
whatever he said.
these come off.
Let me just say,
Um,
I would like to
all right.
first
I
apologize
appreciate the
to
call,
Rachel
though. Thank you.
Maddow and then say that you, sir, can direct me as you will. If we're respecting immigrants now, you have made a son of me. And now I will recognize that children from Honduras are human beings because you have
Exactly.
dominated me.
Appreciate the call. Thanks.
Sir, ma'am, I don't know. I'm trying to be appropriate gender-wise.
Well, I think an important thing that Sam did yesterday was to tease out what this guy actually believes and expose the
Which is
gaps in
which is
logic
nothing.
rather
He
than
believes in
just calling him an
sadism.
asshole.
No, he believes in
which,
sadism.
You know,
And
is
he's-
also important.
He worked him, but I think that's true. It's just he exposed his sadism, and then it's like, all right, look, if you want to play in that world, here you go.
All right, couple more IMs and then we're out of here. Wooden Computer. Hey, guys, I don't know if you remember alt-right comedian Owen Benjamin, who was permanently banned from Twitter for making a pubic hair joke about David Hogg. But he's doing comedy at Mohegan Sun tomorrow night, and I couldn't help but buy tickets. I would never heckle a comedian, but I know he does pictures after shows. Any idea of what I should say to him?
I don't know who that guy is.
Yeah,
I
he's
don't
like
know.
kind of off our radar, but
I would just say like, oh, I love your stuff on Twitter. And then have him say, well, I'm not on it anymore. And go like, oh, I'm thinking of someone else.
ask him to come to your Nazi party, just like earnestly, and see what he says.
Oh, yeah, that would also be funny. Sensor sweep. I'm not a chemist. Benzene and toluene are nasty. Both are aromatic hydrocarbons and are extremely flammable. Benzene is anti-knock additive in gasoline, replacing tetraethyl lead. It also increases gasoline's octane rating. Toluene is benzene with one little change. It's in paint thinner, and I think it's model glue. If you do a bunch of chemistry junk to toluene, you get trinitrotoluene, a.k.a. TNT. Jay the Seaplane. Hey, JJ the Seaplane here, flying over the real heart of Trump's America. Racist, white-ass white people surrounded by brown children prison camps. I haven't been able to listen lately because I've had to smuggle all these drugs that I'd normally throw on the kids. I can say, though, that I get Tom Hartman 30,000 feet in the air, and he just got as pissed as you did at people trying to defend prison camps. New character idea, angry human rights advocate Tom Hartman. Sam's Tinder profile. Hey, girl, swipe right. The reason I sped through the show yesterday was to see you. It's a zero-sum game, don't you see? Worcester Polly Shore. Of course, Trump would be a fan of the fascism movie Starship Troopers, considering undocumented immigrants like giant bugs. Chris Burdick. American dominance of space. Has no one informed him how big space is yet? Bad Lobster. Michael should finish everything he says with, that's a big statement. Jessica 73. Can't stand to listen to Trump speak. He half snorts in between words while he speaks. Has anyone else noticed that? Yeah. 3 more. Colin from Nebraska. If the kids in cages had bunk beds, they'd have more room for activities like mysterious and anarcho-chopunk. Someone asked Jake Flores, how much culture can we appropriate if we kill that shithead who called in yesterday? Also, if crossing the border is the same level of offense as impersonating a mail carrier, when do we kidnap John Ratzenberger's kids? And the final IM of the day, Wu-Tang Clan. Sam, I think you're missing the real reason Laura Ingraham is despicable. She used to willingly have carnal knowledge with Dinesh D'Souza on a regular basis.
Seriously?
Hope you can bleach that image out of your head.
That was a brutal way to end,
See you
Sam.
tomorrow.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the lie bar. But finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. I guess somewhere the choice was made for the option where you don't get paid, for the road that bends before it finally breaks you. I guess somehow I lost my drive between the 101 and the 5. Do you know how far the detour takes you? Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. The months drifted into years while I shifted